We are live. We're live. We're not love. I'm trying to send a text message to somebody to tell them that we're live right now, but my phone keeps changing the word to love. How annoying, right? Welcome to the What's on Sports podcast, brought to you live on Facebook and YouTube. And for those of you listening, you guys, the thousands and thousands of people who download this show, thank you very much for doing so. It's great to have people listen to our voices. It really is. My name is John Todora, and I'll be your host today on the What's on Sports podcast. Before we go any further, I want to remind you that today's show is brought to us by Sports Trading Systems. You can learn how to trade sports just like other people trade stocks. It's a system. It's got rhythms. It's got algorithms. It's got all sorts of good stuff. This thing will show you how to trade sports like other people trade stocks. Use these gambling lines as an investment instead of just a fun thing to do. Help you enjoy your weekends and help you make a little bit of extra money also. Today we're going to be talking about some great stuff, including my own personal 5-1 weekend. I had a fantastic weekend at the sports books. It was ruined by my own team, my favorite team. Destroyed my perfect weekend, but we'll talk about that a little bit. We're also going to talk about how the Chicago Bears and how the ending of that game cost sports books what has to be millions and millions and millions of dollars. Just an epic slap for the sports books this weekend. We're going to talk about the Steelers and talk about slaps. This has got to be the most, I hate that you keep using the word, but an epic collapse of like cataclysmic proportions. I've never seen a team fall apart so badly in an NFL playoff game. It was terrible. We're going to talk about what's next for these NFL teams that are no longer in the playoffs. Let's not forget about them because these teams are good teams, or at least they were good teams, and they have a chance to be even better next year. So let's talk about how we can do that. And then we'll talk about the national championship. We're going to dive into some college football because tonight's a big night, big national championship. Alabama versus Ohio State, the Ohio State. Coming up tonight, Lance Fernandez will be joining us from the What's on Sports website to talk about that. So I'll be very interested to hear what he has to say. A full review of the national championship is coming up tonight. And then to kind of wrap up the show, we'll be talking about the mailbag. And that's where we give you guys the opportunity to talk to us, to ask us questions that we are more than happy to answer for you on this show. So let's dive into my weekend. Now, I'm sitting there on Saturday. I'm 3-0. I mean, I'm crushing it. Now, picking the Bills wasn't hard, but picking the Bills in a tight game like that was an absolute masterstroke by me. I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but I'm patting away right now. Called that game to the letter. I called the next game to the letter exactly. I called that game to the letter. And I said the Ravens are going to overpower the Titans. I told you exactly how it would happen, and it happened that way. And then for the last game of the day on Saturday, I literally said, if Alex Smith plays this game, Tampa's in trouble. And Alex Smith didn't play. Last minute scratch. I got the alert on my phone at like 4 o'clock for an 8 o'clock game. I was like, wow, I can't believe he's not playing. They put in their 4th-string quarterback, a guy who started the season on the practice squad. And they still kept that game close enough that they could have beat one or two things going there in their favor. They could have beat Tampa. So like I said, if Alex Smith plays that game, although the quarterback who played for Washington, absolutely, I mean, we're going to talk about him later on. I don't want to get too much into it right now. He was played lights out. I mean, that was a guy who went out there with nothing to lose and said, I am going to take this game and I'm going to play the hell out of it. And he did. He really, a lot of people, if you didn't know his name before, you know it now. I won't tell you. We'll talk about it later in the show. So I go to bed thinking, wow, I'm 3-0. I mean, I called every game exactly how the game was going to go. I mean, exactly. This is fantastic. This is amazing. So then I go into Saturday. I go into Sunday. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I actually messed that up because on Sunday it was Saturday. It was Buffalo and Indianapolis. It was obviously what was the second game on Sunday? I actually forgot the second game on Sunday. I mean on Saturday. I can't believe that. Then I go into Saturday. I'm sorry, into Sunday. I call the Ravens game perfect. I mean, absolutely perfect. I can't believe I call it so good. I tell people exactly how it's going to go. I say it's going to be Lamar Jackson. I say Baltimore's going to show up and shut down the running game. They do. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy how I nail this. I'm getting the schedule here in front of me because I obviously screwed up the whole thing. There we go. So we come into Sunday night, and I'm 5-0, and I have a tradition. I don't usually pick any game that has to do with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just don't do it. I won't do it. I did it earlier in the year when I picked that Pittsburgh would lose against Washington, but I tried to pick them in a positive way. Let me rephrase that, to be fair. So I tried to pick them in a positive way. But this weekend, I do it anyway. And I picked the Steelers. And obviously, that does not go well for me. And we're going to talk about that later on in the show. But that ruins what was a perfect weekend for me. I nailed the Buccaneers in Washington. I nail Ravens, Titans. I nail Bears and Saints. Now, a lot of people nailed the Bears and Saints, and we'll talk about that next. I missed the Steelers and the Browns. And that's the one that really kills me. So if it's not for my own team, I go undefeated over the weekend. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go undefeated this weekend coming up too. I have a good feeling. But let's talk about what happened to some, not gamblers this time. Let's talk about what happened to the sports books. So for those of you that gamble, you know that the line on the Saints and the Bears was 8 points to start the week. Some places I saw was only a 7-point game. But as the week went on, that line moved a lot. And it didn't move like a little tiny bit. It moved a lot. It went from 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11. To see a 4-point swing like that, on a game leads you to know where the money is. So for those of you that don't know how it works, the bookmakers come out, they set a line, they think this is a fair line. Okay, this is a fair line, I get it. He's actually sending me messages. This is a fair line, I get it, 7 points. As money starts to get played on one side or the other, you will see the line move. And that's why you see line moves throughout the week. The only other time you'll see huge line moves is if a major injury is announced. For example, if Drew Brees wasn't going to play or Mitchell Trubisky wasn't going to play, you have to put a backup quarterback, and you'll see line moves then. But if there's no major announcements made for injuries, you won't see usually big line moves. When you see a line move like we saw in the Saints game, when you see a huge line move like that, you realize that there's a tremendous amount of money on the Saints. So the sports books start to move the line. Why do they do that? They do that so that they can start to even out the money. So somebody who thought the Saints were a great play at 7 points, maybe didn't think they were a great play at 8. Maybe they really didn't like it at 9, probably hated it at 10, probably really hated it at 11. So when the game finally ends, it ends at 11 points. Now, this is interesting just for this reason. The end of this game, there is a touchdown. Jimmy Graham caps off a 99-yard drive, makes a great one-handed catch, absolutely fantastic, and that's how the game ends. It ends at the very, very end of the game. As it's expiring, Jimmy Graham scores. Makes the game a 12-point game. If the Bears kick an extra point, they tie the line. It's a push. No one makes any money. No one loses any money. No one makes any money. If they go for 2, the people who had Chicago could actually win. So, why does this matter? It matters because if you know that line moved 3 or 4 points for the bookmakers, that means that there must have been millions and millions of dollars on the Saints. So when the Saints did cover, they actually lost millions of dollars. If the Saints wouldn't have covered, or if they would have pushed by that little extra field goal or that 2-point conversion, the bookkeepers wouldn't have lost any money. Now, my inside sources from people that I know that work at some of these online books told me that Saturday was a great day for them. For whatever reason, I was 3-0, but the rest of the country wasn't. The rest of the country was upside down. So the books made a ton of money on Saturday, and they lost all, if not more, than what they made on Saturday, on Sunday, just because of this Saints game. So right now they got to be losing their minds. But there's nothing they can do because this rule change was made in 2018. It was actually it was changed because of I think it's like Section 4 or Rule 4, Section 8, Article 2 of the NFL or something like that. If a touchdown is made on the last play of the period, a try attempt shall be made except during sudden death periods or if the touchdown is scored during a down which time in the fourth quarter expires, and a successful try would not affect the outcome of the game. So there was no reason to kick this field goal. There was this extra point. There was no reason to go for 2. So the officials say, doesn't make a difference. We're not going to let you go for it. And they don't, and it costs them millions and millions of dollars. So, hey, it's gambling. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. The bookkeepers, the bookmakers, your DraftKings, your FanDuels, sometimes those guys have amazing weekends. And sometimes they eat it on the other weekends, You just never know which way it's going to go. We have Lance Fernandez, who's going to be joining us a little bit later on in the show. He's a writer over at whatsonsports.com. He used to work for Fox Sports. But today he'll be joining us talking about what's next for some of these NFL teams. And also, we'll be doing a brief recap of the national championship game before it starts a little bit later on tonight. But before I go into that, I really want to talk about something a little personal right now. Now, for those of you that follow the show, you probably know I'm a huge Steeler fan. I've been a Steeler fan since I was this high. I grew up in Pittsburgh, just kind of the way it was. My first memory of real sports is being young and watching my father bet on a Pittsburgh Steelers Super Bowl and not understanding that my mother had told me that my dad had a lot of money on the game. And I remember having this long conversation trying to understand what it was he did. Like, what was he doing? And I realized he was gambling later on. But really one of my first sports memories, my first Steeler memory actually, is that right there. I watched the entire game. I rooted for the Steelers because my father had money on them. That was kind of how I was indoctrinated into sports. So I've been a super Steeler fan. I was a Bill Cowher fan. I was a Chuck Noll fan. I'm a Mike Tomlin fan. I appreciate the product. I appreciate what we put out there. I appreciate the effort. I got to tell you, I have never, ever, not just as a Steeler fan, but as a fan of football, as a fan of sports, I have never seen a team have such an epic, huge, catastrophic collapse as I saw with the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. They were 11-0. And granted, I told people when it was happening, this is an 11-0 team that really should be about 9-2. The schedule wasn't super hard. It was an easy schedule. There were a lot of games they could have lost but didn't lose. That's what makes a good team. But there were far too many close games to call this a super elite team. So I wasn't on the bandwagon of how great we are. I was on the bandwagon of we're a pretty good team. That was completely proven false to me. Totally and completely proven false to me as I watched the Steelers collapse after going 11-0, lose 3 games in a row, and somehow come around to actually win one of their last 2 games in order to make it to the playoffs with a fairly decent record of 12-4. Now, a lot of things can be said about that. They rested some players. They had some injuries. Ben had a cold streak. The wide receivers couldn't catch the ball. Whatever you want to say, you can say. But there is no excuse for what happened yesterday. There is no excuse for what happened yesterday. You started off your game by snapping the ball 3 feet over your quarterback's head into the end zone for a touchdown. That was how you started the game. So to preface this, first of all, you anger the hell out of them by having Juju Smith-Schuster release a statement saying that the Browns are faceless gray people. They're just the Browns. Okay, good enough. Like they weren't pumped up enough as it was. And the Browns, who a lot of people didn't recognize, the Browns came in with a huge advantage. It wasn't a disadvantage that their head coach was not there and couldn't call plays. That was an advantage because you can't study the tendencies of this new play caller. So Pittsburgh had no idea what Cleveland was going to call. It showed in what they did. Stefanski was out. Van Pelt called all the plays. Van Pelt did a great job of finding Pittsburgh's weaknesses, exploiting them. He did a great job of realizing, oh, wow, they have an injury of what their outside linebackers out. The kid who's in place for him looks like a safety. We're gonna take over the edge. We're gonna smash the edge. Number 49 for Pittsburgh, who I don't even know who the hell he is, ends up being the outside linebacker whenever the rookie goes down, and he literally gets pancaked at least 5 times. At least 5 times. Like, you have to set the edge. If the edge is setting you and pounding you into the ground, they're going to pick up a lot of yardage. And that's exactly what they did. It was an epic collapse in every level yesterday for the Steelers. That did not look like a playoff team. It did not look like a good team. You want to talk about Ben Roethlisberger's 4 turnovers? They were awful. Ben, I know that's a terrible note to go out on, but that's the note you should go out on. The back half of the season really showed that you should stop. It's painful to say it. I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I'm a Ben Roethlisberger fan. You should stop. You should stop playing. It's over. It's time to move on. If you stay with the franchise, you will hang them with a $40 million salary cap just for you next year. Find a way to exit that deal and get yourself off the team, whatever it is you have to do. Whatever it is you guys have to do to figure it out. That you have to move on. It's time to move forward. It's time to move forward for a lot of things. That team needs a lot of help right now. From going from 11-0 to the back half of the season just shows you the age of that team. You're going to lose Juju. You're going to lose James Conner. You're going to lose there's 22 guys right now that they're going to lose. Mike Hilton will be gone. Really sets the tone in that secondary. They'll be gone. It's just a rebuild. It's coming up right now, and the Steelers are going to be faced with some tough choices. I think the best thing for them to do, if they truly care about their franchise, is to move forward without Ben Roethlisberger, and do what they got to do. We'll be featuring an article about this a little bit later on the What's on Sports podcast. For those of you the whatsonsports.com website, I apologize. For those of you that are watching at home, we have an artist who works for us. Her name is Cleo. I had her put together a cool little piece of art. And again, it's painful to ask her to do this. Pittsburgh fan right here. Ben Roethlisberger fan right here. Always have been. Always have supported him, the team. He's had bad games. I've still stood by him. This is what I see now when I see him out there. And I don't want to see it anymore. I don't want to see it anymore. You know, we talk about these quarterbacks and when it's time to go, and how a franchise can't do it. A franchise can't say, hey, it's time to go. We have to let you go. But in this case, I think the Steelers need to say, we have to let you go. The Saints at the end of this year should say to Drew Brees, we have to let you go. It's time. It's not you, it's us. However the breakup has to happen, it has to happen. We want to hold you in high esteem forever. If you continue to play, we won't do that. And it'll affect your legacy. Play to the ego, whatever you have to do. It's got to be the hardest thing in the world for a quarterback to stop playing. He gets the ball in his hands every play. Like, imagine going from the center of the universe to just some guy named Ben who's married with 2 kids or 3 kids. It's going to be difficult. I can't imagine it because I've never been the center of that universe. I can only imagine it's got to be painful, but it's a conversation that has to happen. From a Steeler fan to the Steeler organization, if you guys happen to run across this video, listen to this podcast, something about this pops up, please, for God's sakes, let's have the conversation. Let's move on. Let's rebuild. It's the best I could say. Let's move on here on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is John Todora. I am your host today, the What's on Sports podcast, and I do want to remind you we do have a sponsor, and I like to mention it throughout the show because it's an opportunity for you to really make some cash, change your life maybe. The sponsor is called SportsTradingSystems.com. It's SportsTradingSystems.com. It's on the top of our video screen here if you guys are watching at home. You can go to SportsTradingSystems.com, learn to trade sports just like other people trade stocks. There's tons of great information over there, free information on the website. Go over and check it out today, and sign up. And I got a special deal for you. For those of you that are watching at home and are thinking, I would love to try Sports Trading Systems. I've heard about it. I've heard about their score metrics for basketball systems, which are giving back returns of over 70% so far this year. You can go over there today, and if you use the promo code WINNING when you check out, you'll get $300 off your offer. Off your offer today, $300 off by going over and checking it out today. Go to SportsTradingSystems.com. Use the promo code WINNING when you check out. All right. It's been a great show so far, mainly because I got to get some of that stuff off my chest. But I can't do the show alone. As much as I love doing it alone, I love to bring on people that know a little more than I do. And today we're going to do that. Joining us from our website, whatsonsports.com, Mr. Lance Fernandez is in the building. Lance, how are you, buddy?
Hello, John. Hope you were able to catch some sleep after that epic Super Wildcard weekend that we've had.
I got to be honest. I slept like a baby on Saturday. Last night was tough after watching that game. There were moments, Lance, when I was going to turn the TV off. I was going to do it. I'm turning the TV off. I'm not going to watch any more of this. And then Pittsburgh would come back a little bit, and I'd be like, all right, I'll watch. I don't want to miss it if it's a huge. And then I would turn it off, and somehow they roped me into watching the whole damn game. So, yes, and then I couldn't sleep afterwards. So, yes, you're right. I did not sleep super great. Thanks for bringing it up. Today, we're going to talk about some really good stuff. Lance has been doing some in-depth research about what's next for these teams. Now, I know it's very fresh for some of you fans out there. Still, whether you're a Steeler fan or a Bears fan, your season's over. It's over. But we can still talk about what's next. That's the best part about football. So what's next is what we're going to talk about. Lance Fernandez in the building today, and today we're going to talk about each team. We'll break them down one at a time. We just had a long conversation about the Browns and the Steelers. What's next for the Steelers?
Okay, next for the Steelers, just like you've mentioned earlier, Ben Roethlisberger will be in the cap for $40 million. So if he decides to come back, that would be a big hit to the cap because the salary cap for next season might dip, if not stay the same. So that would still be a big percentage of their salary going into the 2021 season. So that would be the biggest question that they have to face coming into next season, because that would be a big amount to be able to work with.
Yeah.
If they will be able to free it up. They will be able to pick more players to bolster, especially their offensive line that has been pressured so much by the Browns in the Super Wildcard weekend. So aside from Ben Roethlisberger, I guess they have to tinker some of their players in that O line. And it's also fascinating that come 2021, come next season, one of their stalwarts in the O line, Alejandro Villanueva, will be a free agent. So they have to decide on him as well if they are to extend him or not, because he has been a vital cog in defending the quarterback for the Steelers.
Yeah, look, Venezuela is a fantastic left tackle when it comes to pass protection. He has not been good against the run. That entire left side with Feeler and Venezuela together have been really bad against the run. It's impossible for them to run off the right side. It's almost impossible for them to run off the left side. It's almost impossible for them to run off the right side as well. That offensive line needs a tremendous amount of work, whether it's new coaching, new players. I think it's all across the board. That team's in a tremendous amount of trouble, in my opinion. They're getting older in places that they shouldn't, and they're getting worse in places that they shouldn't. And like I said before, I think the best thing for them to do is to move on from Ben Roethlisberger. And like I said, painful as a Steeler fan. Move on from Ben, see what you can put together. Let's talk about the Indianapolis Colts. Phillip Rivers signed a 1-year contract, actually with a 1-year extension that the team had the option for. What do you think the Colts are going to do?
So just like the Steelers, quarterback would be the biggest concern for the Colts coming into the offseason. Will Phillip Rivers continue to play? Will he come back, or will he eventually retire? Because he is already up in terms of age, and we all know that father time cannot be defeated, especially in sports. So he still has shown that he has something left in the tank, but he did come up short against the Bills. So we have to highlight that. He was able to make the long throws, but he was not able to connect with his receivers down the field. And I guess it would be time for the Colts to find another quarterback other than Jacoby Brissett, because if they are going to hang their hopes on Brissett alone, then they are hanging their hopes short enough, because Brissett may have what it takes to be a starting quarterback, but he's not at the same level as Phillip Rivers. So rumor has it that Matthew Stafford might be going to the Colts. So there might be some conversations going on in this offseason that if Matthew Stafford eventually thinks that he has done enough for the Detroit Lions, then he might go into the Indianapolis Colts and continue his career until he walks off into the sunset.
Yeah, I think it's such a tough position to be in if you're somebody who's like the Colts, or even if you're like the Steelers. You're not going to get an opportunity to draft a quarterback that you can build around. And the benefits of drafting a quarterback that you can build around is that you get cheap labor for 5 years, cheap compared to what the salary cap would be for a really good franchise quarterback. So you don't have that opportunity. You're not going to get a shot at a quarterback when you draft where the Colts are going to draft or where the Steelers are going to draft in the 20s. So it's going to be very interesting. I didn't think that Rivers played as bad as Ben played yesterday. I thought he played okay. He is a guy that you can build around, I think, in my opinion, because he brings that Phillip Rivers moxie to the team. So he definitely is somebody that you can build around. But it's a tough situation for somebody like Indianapolis. We're talking about quarterbacks, and I want to go into the other division right now, and I want to talk about the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears were only 8-8, but they had a very good run with Trubisky. So without Trubisky, they were just a really subpar team. With Trubisky, they were a very good team. At least, good enough to get to 8-8 and good enough to stay in the playoffs. Where do you think happens to the Chicago Bears next?
Well, they will have to take a deep evaluation with what they have at quarterback. As we all know, it's a cliche. It's the most important position in the NFL. And Mitchell Trubisky will bring them somewhere, but not maybe to the promised land. As we all know, they have reached the playoffs, but they performed a dud, which is a 9-point outing against the New Orleans Saints, wherein they scored in the very last play offensively. If not for that, they have scored only 3. So that's just a special team score. So sadly for Trubisky, his performance will forever be linked to that player drafted 8 spots after him, Patrick Mahomes. So that would be always a high bar for comparison for him.
And Deshaun Watson.
And Deshaun Watson as well. Yeah, you're right.
All the same draft.
So with those bars of comparison, where do you put Mitchell Trubisky? How do you make a fair assessment of him? Will the Bears be happy that they have reached the wild card stage with a quarterback like Trubisky when they know that he is not the best quarterback of their class? So have they learned their lesson with this cautionary tale? And if they do, are they going quarterback not next season, but maybe in 2022? Because they will be getting a high draft pick in the first round right now. So all of the better quarterbacks might be gone once they have their selection. Not to mention that it will also be Trubisky's last year next season. And then they would also have to deal with the impending free agency of Allen Robinson, their wide receiver. And more importantly, Cordell Patterson as well. So those are a lot of questions revolving around the front office of the Chicago Bears coming into 2021.
I think the biggest thing for Trubisky is that he's always going to be compared to those guys that he was drafted with. And it's always going to be a moment where everybody, myself included, I'm a draft nick. I was watching the draft, and I believe the Bears, if my memory serves correct, the Bears were picking 4th that year. And a lot of people thought they were going to go quarterback. A lot of people thought they were going to go Deshaun Watson, actually. And they literally said Mitchell Trubisky, and everybody was like, who? Because, Trubisky was late first round, early second round, and the Bears took him 4th, thinking they knew something that everybody else didn't know, and it proved out that they didn't know anything. And it's going to be it's a tough to wash that away. Let's talk about the Tennessee Titans. Now, this is one of my favorite teams all year long. I love the way Tennessee plays. I didn't think their defense was as good as it needed to be, but I love their offense. Old school, smashed mouth football, decent quarterback who could run the ball. Derrick Henry's obviously a beast. What's in the future for the Tennessee Titans?
Okay, so before we go any further, so Mitchell Trubisky was drafted 2nd in the 2017 draft, just to clarify.
Wow, 2nd.
So that high. Anyway, so going back, just by the game against the Ravens alone, we now know that the heart and soul of the Titans offense, without question, is Derrick Henry. He only had 40 in that game, and where did that bring the Titans? Nowhere. They had a 10-point lead, squandered it. Eventually, the Ravens win in what eventually ended up being a running game because both sides would prefer the run. And then Lamar Jackson broke into a big run, scored a touchdown. And when you match the Ravens with their strengths, which is the run, more chances are you're going to lose. So with that assessment alone, I guess the best way to go for the Titans for 2021, if they can, is to add weapons on the receiving core. They do have an AJ Brown, they do have a Jonu Smith, but they would need someone else that can create separation, create distance from
Mm,
from defenders, especially on one-on-one man-to-man coverages. That's
yeah.
something that they need, especially if something like this happens again. If Henry performs under par, at least they're not crippled in terms of their offense. If their play action is killed because Henry's not doing well, they can still have that deep option threat down the field. And of course, for 2021, they also have to think of Jadavion Clowney's impending free agency. They also
Mm.
have to think of Corey Davis's impending free agency and Daquan Jones' impending free agency.
Yeah, you look. I look at the Titans yesterday, and I would disagree with one thing. I thought the Titans could move the ball against the Ravens through the air. For some reason, they stopped. There seemed to be a fear of I don't know, turning the ball over. To me, you're right. You get a 10-point lead. You think, well, let's just hang on to this lead and not really try to push it. And I think that they could have. I think they could have pushed it really and really tried to really tried to push it to the point where they could have blown the Ravens out. There was that moment where it was like, oh man, if you can turn the Ravens into a one-dimensional team where they feel like they have to throw the ball, then I think you're in a much better situation than you are. But I think that they got afraid. I think they got scared. I think they puckered up. Bad coaching yesterday by the Titans. Bad coaching. You let the Ravens stay in the game close enough to actually play their own game, which is not something that we wanted. It looks like maybe I lost Lance. Let's talk about the Washington football team. Now, to me, this team actually shocked me. They started off the year with Dwayne Haskins. He was the starter. Then they moved over to Kyle Allen. He was the starter for a minute. Then they moved over to Alex Smith, who actually surprised all of us by playing really, really well. They finished the year with Taylor Heineke as their quarterback. And to me, it was one of those things where you're just like, wow, man, Taylor Heineke, how's this going to work out for everybody? And it ends up not working out that bad, actually. Washington played pretty well. So where does that leave Washington going forward? I think for me, I like what Washington's building there. I think Ron Rivera is the perfect coach to be a part of that culture. I think that they got a running game. I think they're putting themselves together to be an NFL caliber team. They can rush 4 passers. They obviously, I think they need a little help in their back end. So I'm looking at secondary help. I'm looking at a long-term solution to quarterback. I would like to see them find something like that. And to continue to put weapons around whoever that quarterback is, to me, is super, super important. But one of the most interesting teams this year, Lance, I see you're back with us. One of the most interesting teams this year was the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, they started off like the best team in the NFL. Russell Wilson was going to be MVP. This was going to be the best team in the NFL. People were talking about them being undefeated. Right around game 5, reality kicks in, and this team becomes a good team, but not a great team, and exposed very badly in that LA game. What's next for the Seattle Seahawks?
So, frankly, the Los Angeles Rams, honest assessment, won both battles in the trenches. They won both the defensive line battle and the offensive line battle. I mean, 39-year-old Andrew Whitworth just shut down the pass rush of the Seattle Seahawks. And then on the other end, the likes of Aaron Donald and his front four were continuing to get pressure from scrimmage, that Russell Wilson wasn't comfortable throwing the ball all day because somebody's already in his face once the ball is snapped. So I guess that's the main concern for the Seahawks. I guess it's tinkering with the trenches. They do have good linemen, but towards the end of the season, it's just faltered. It just all faltered, and then eventually, this lineup that played during the wild card hasn't played that much during the entire regular season. So that could be a concern. Either they don't have, they can do better in terms of talent, or probably having a training camp or off-season camp would help them have more cohesion in the O-line. So those are the questions that they have to face coming into next season.
Yeah, look, I think that defense has to be addressed. The defense was putrid for the first 8 games. The back half of the season, the defense played a lot better because the pass rush played better. But when you run into a good offensive line that can actually stop the pass rush or hold back the pass rush, you see the chinks in the armor. You see a defense that can't stop Cam Akers. You see a defense that couldn't stop Jared Goff with a broken thumb. I mean, they were exposed in a big way to me yesterday. It's a shame to see Seattle go, but I think that team is not as good as their 12-4 record. I've been saying that all year long. I stick to that. I think it's the same answer no matter which way you look at it. Russell Wilson can't be the guy who cooks. Russell Wilson is a fantastic complementary piece as a leader to a team, as a guy who can make plays with his legs, as a guy who can hit those passes when he needs to hit them. But he can't be the guy who stands back there and just chucks the ball 65 times a game. And to be clear, I don't think there's any NFL quarterback that can do that. I think every team needs some balance. Even your Patrick Mahomes plays much better when he's got a run game. Or your Aaron Rodgers plays much better when he's got a run game behind him. So I think Seattle needs to fix that offensive line. They need to become more balanced, and they got to fix that defense. Got to fix the defense. Talking to us today, Lance Fernandez, who's one of our writers over here on What's on Sports. Lance is going to cover one of the big topics of the day because we're going to talk about the national championship right now. Now, this has been a wild season in college football. Very strange because of COVID regulations, and certain teams played a full season, but not a real full season, and other teams played a part of a season, and they're calling it a real season. Well, this is where we've ended up. It's 2020, 2021 in the sports world. We just kind of take what we can get. This is what we've ended up with. It's Alabama versus the Ohio State, number 1 versus number 3 for all the marbles. How do you see this game playing out, Lance? Well, what can you tell us?
Okay, so this is the 3rd straight year that undefeated teams will be fighting for the national championship. If Alabama wins, they would win their 3rd national championship. Ohio State would win their 2nd if they can somehow pull off an upset against the powerful Alabama Crimson Tide. They won the initial college football playoff national game, and they're looking to win it again here in this crazy of a ride of a 2020 season. So speaking of Ohio State first, they only played 7 games prior to the Big Ten Championship and prior to the All-State Sugar Bowl against Clemson. So 7 games, they could have played 10, but 3 of those have been canceled, one of which is against their most hated rival, Michigan. So Big Noon was canceled this season, but still, they went with a 7-0 record. They defeated some ranked teams like Northwestern and went on to the All-State Sugar Bowl, wherein Dabo Swinney, again, used his mouth to put some bulletin board material by saying that Ohio State, for him, is only ranked 11th in the nation. Well, he did give some reason that they did not play up at least 10 games.
Yeah.
So that is the reasoning. And that was enough bulletin board material for Justin Fields, Chris Olave, Trey Sermon, and the guys to be able to dominate, not just defeat, but dominate
Bananas.
Clemson, who was favored coming into the game. It was just a total domination, a total trashing of the Clemson Tigers. And one of the things that they did during that game that helped them, because they know that Clemson is showing some fascination into sign stealing, which is legal, by the way, in college football. They huddled more. So that slowed the game, and that kept the Tigers continue to question or continue to decipher what's next for the Buckeyes. So impressive performance for Ohio State, and they look to do the same thing once again against the powerful Alabama Crimson Tide.
So when you watched Ohio State go against Clemson, Ohio State really exposed Clemson for not being able to cover the deep pass, which I had seen quite a few Clemson games this year and I hadn't seen before. Justin Fields was just tossing the ball 40, 50, 60 yards downfield and throwing strike after strike after strike. It was demoralizing for Clemson. Do you think they can do the same thing against a very talented Alabama team?
I guess they have what it takes. They have the personnel, but Fields would have to pick up his spots because the Alabama secondary is no question. You cannot sleep on this, guys, especially when you have a Patrick Surtain II on the secondary,
Yeah.
who has been a ball hawk all season, who has picked up some good coverages and has been essentially the navigator of that secondary to dictate where his cornerbacks and his safeties would have to place themselves in every
Mm.
play. So Ohio State has what it takes to continue to throw deep, but they would have to do it um, more patiently, do it within a methodical drive,
Yeah.
so as to limit the turnovers that might um, essentially eliminate them from the game.
Yeah, when you play an Alabama team, you're really playing against, and the same could almost be said for an Ohio State team. But I think Alabama, even more so, Alabama's is a pro football factory. I mean, they're just churning out, all pro safeties. They're churning out NFL caliber linebackers, NFL caliber defensive linemen. There are so many players from Alabama that are in the NFL right now and usually hit the ground NFL ready that it's scary. Now Ohio State can say the same thing. So I think you're going to see talent on talent. So it's really going to come down to coaching and quarterbacks. Let's just talk about the quarterbacks right now. We're looking at Justin Fields against
Mac Jones.
Mac Jones. Yeah, I blanked on his name. Against Mac Jones. Both were Heisman Trophy-esque type of candidates. Obviously, Alabama has the Heisman Trophy winner on it. Ohio State's very talented at the wide receiver as well. So let's just go to quarterbacks. Who do you think has the advantage here, Jones or Fields?
I would have to give the advantage to Mac Jones because he would have better players to throw to. I know Justin Fields is talented. He has proven that he can win the game by throwing the deep ball. He has 6 touchdown passes against Clemson in that Sugar Bowl, in that semifinal. But in terms of accuracy, in terms of better decision making, and in terms of just running an overall scheme of an offense, I would have to give an advantage to Mac Jones.
Yeah, look, it's hard to dispute it, actually, just from everything you said. I mean, if you're looking at just both quarterbacks, Justin Fields is the more talented person. You're looking at the NFL draft right now. They're talking about Fields going number 2 overall, number 3 at the very worst. Mac Jones, late first round, still a talented quarterback. But when it comes down to what you have around you, I mean, look, Alabama, like I said, putting out pro-level players at every position, but they had 2 wide receivers go in the top 15 of last year's draft. They may have 2 go again this year in the top 15 of this year's draft. I don't know a team that's ever been able to do that, to continually churn out NFL caliber first-round receivers over and over and over again. It's truly impressive. So I can see why you would go with Mac Jones. Do you want to give us a score before you go today? What do you think the final score will be of the game?
Okay, so bookies have it at Alabama minus 8.5. I would think that I guess you cannot underestimate Ohio State's offensive prowess. They have shown it against Clemson. So if I were to put a scoring line into this, I would say Alabama takes it 42-33.
Wow. Really high scoring game, huh?
Yes.
Wow, that's incredible. All right. So that's your pick for the day. We're going to come back. We'll talk about our this week. We'll cover it. I covered it earlier in the show. On Wednesday, I'm going to have you back on the show. We'll talk about your pick today. I also want to talk to you about your picks over the weekend and compare against me and see who did better. I think I did better. I'm not sure. But anyway, I want to thank you for coming on the show. His name is Lance Fernandez. Lance is writing a lot of good stuff. You'll be seeing it all day today on whatsonsports.com. Lance, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Speaking of our website is whatsonsports.com. You can go over anytime you want to and read some really great articles. And also, you can send us your questions that we will answer on this show. We're happy to do it. Happy to answer your questions to the best of our ability. We invite you to do that. Send us your questions. And today I'm going to answer some questions that came in just recently. After losing to the New Orleans Saints, is it time for the Chicago Bears to move on from Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback? Listen, I watched that game yesterday in detail. I thought Trubisky played a pretty good game. I think the game would have been much different if not for a dropped, perfectly thrown pass into the end zone. Trubisky hits a guy, right in his hands, dropped the ball. I want to say his name was Nix. I can't remember his last name, to be honest. 83 for the Bears. Dropped the ball that should have been a touchdown. That's a different game if he catches that ball. It's a different game, not only on the scoreboard, but in the way that it's called. It opens up so many other things. Chicago can stick to the run, and Trubisky can have a lot more play action. That play, that singular play, was the difference in the entire game. Was a difference in the entire game and how the game was played, how the game was called, and therefore how Trubisky was allowed to play. So should they move on from Trubisky? I don't know. You watch this guy play, especially the last 5 games of the year, and he looks like there's some potential there. So Chicago, to their credit, realized that what they were doing with Trubisky before wasn't working. They changed their play calling. It seems to fit him a lot better. If you're going to dedicate yourself to Mitchell Trubisky being your quarterback, you're going to have to change things to fit his style instead of constantly taking a quarterback like Trubisky and making him fit into your style. Whoever worked with Josh Allen in Chicago, these guys have the mere cloned skill sets. They're both tall. They're both big, strapping kids. They both got, like shotguns for arms, and they've both got the ability to run, move the pocket. The difference is that Josh Allen is here when it comes to like his mental acuity for the game, and I don't think Trubisky's caught up to him. And a lot of that has to do with the way he's been coached. So a lot of times as a manager, as a coach, I think you need to look at yourself and you need to be able to compare what you've done and how you've been able to bring your employees, how you've been able to bring your players up to a different level, up to a different standard. And I would say that Chicago has failed miserably in bringing Trubisky up to a standard that he should be for a number 2 overall pick. So I'm not sure it's time to give up on him. If it is time to give up for him, I guarantee that Mitchell Trubisky will not be on the streets for long. Somebody will pick him up right away as a reclamation project or even as a possible starter and give him an opportunity. So I would hate to see Chicago look back on this moment and say, wow, we really should have coached up Mitchell Trubisky in a better way. By the way, there are some Chicago fans watching this right now that are just screaming, no! So let's go on to our next question. Which of the non-NFL teams have the best chance of making the playoffs next season? This is easy for me. The Miami Dolphins have got the best chance. They should have made it this year. They had an epic meltdown in Week 17. If not for that, they would have made it this year. So whether the Dolphins stick with Tua or end up with a Deshaun Watson somehow, that defense is put together to be one that can bring you to the playoffs all by itself. You've got a great secondary, you've got a pass rush, and you've got decent linebackers. You can get yourself to the playoffs. Now, the Dolphins can go one of 2 ways. They can trade Tua and some first-round picks and try to get Deshaun Watson. That immediately makes you a better team. What it doesn't do is it doesn't fix the gap that you have at wide receiver, the talent that you need there. But perhaps you bring in a Watson and then you hit the free agent market and you fill your skill positions up so that Watson has some weapons. If you stick with Tua, you've got 2 first-round picks this year. You've got 2 second-round picks, and you've got cap space. You can fill that team up with talent, which is what you need to do. There needs to be some scary people on offense, and right now you don't have that. You've got a pretty middling, slightly above average offense, unless your backup quarterback's playing, and then it's slightly scary and slightly dangerous. But to me, that defense is what will take you to the next level. So what team could make it to the playoffs next year? For me, it's the Miami Dolphins, number 1. And number 2, Washington Redskins. And for the exact same reasons that we're talking about with the Dolphins. And I know the Redskins already made the playoffs, but those are my 2 teams next year that I think are going to take huge, huge steps. Now, unless there's some huge change in free agency, that'll be my calls. For next year, Miami Dolphins, Washington Redskins are the 2 teams I see taking the biggest leap. The Miami Dolphins are the 1 team that did make the playoffs that I see making the playoffs next year. Last question of the day. Does the LA Rams, okay, this is written poorly, but do the LA Rams stand any chance in defeating the Green Bay Packers during the divisional playoffs? Yes, they do. Because the LA Rams have got a defense. And they've got someone that can lock down the best wide receiver on the field. So Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey are an incredible combination. Aaron Donald will blow up the pocket, will rush from the outside. You don't know where he's coming from. A different guy has to take on Aaron Donald at all points. If you watch the Rams game at all yesterday, at some points there would be 3 Rams on the left side of the offensive line and only Aaron Donald on the right side of the offensive line. Everyone else is getting one-on-one blocking, and Aaron Donald will have 2 or 3 guys trying to slow him down and still failing to do so. The guy is an absolute positive beast. Now, he did injure himself in this game. If he cannot play on Sunday against the Packers, all bets are off. The Packers will roll over them. But if he can play, I think this is going to be a much tighter and much tougher game than the Packers want to actually have to deal with. And that's what I'm telling you. Keep an eye on Donald and his injury throughout the week. See what's going to happen. If he gets on the field, the Packers are going to have a fight on their hands. Are they going to win? I believe the Packers will still win. But I believe that the Rams will most definitely have a chance to take it to the Packers. A couple turnovers, a couple mistakes by the Packers, and the game could go the other way. So, yeah, I think the Rams are a real team. My name is John Todora. This has been the What's on Sports podcast. We come to you live Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10:30 in the morning. Giving you good stuff. Good stuff. Lots of cool things happening on the website this week. Make sure you guys go over and check out whatsonsports.com and check out our sponsor one last time. It's sportstradingsystems.com. Download the show on your favorite podcast platform. I'm out of here.